Hi everyone, my name is Davide Stronati and I'm talking to you from London in the UK today, and it is a great pleasure to have you here in this webinar organized by the World Federation of Engineering Organizations with ICSI. So within WFEO, I'm the chair of the working group on engineering and climate change, and today we have four incredible speakers and panelists. And we are going to talk about inspiring collective action through communication, advocacy, and best practices. What is the role of engineers? But I think what is important to remember is that this webinar is organized because effectively 1 week ago, on the 4th of March, we celebrated the World Engineering Day as proclaimed by UNESCO. And I think what is important to remember is that it is the World Engineering Day for sustainable development and the role of engineering and engineers in progressing and developing and delivering sustainable development. So as I said today, we are going to have four speakers. The logistics, the housekeeping is pretty simple. I'm asking you to please keep yourself off camera and on mute. There's a this webinar is being recorded and will be made available to view on the WFEO website in the coming days. So, but there is an opportunity for you to put questions in the chat box. So no problems at all. As the speakers will go through what they are going to say, put your questions there. Speakers are going to talk for 7 minutes, roughly. And then we are going to have 2 sessions of Q&A at the end of 2 of the 4 speakers. And at the end, Savina Carluccio, Executive Director of ICSI, is going to give us her views and the conclusions. So let's start with the very first speaker. And I'm going to introduce Craig and Tanyanyiwa. Sorry, Craig, I'm sure I got it wrong. But Craig is an early career civil and environmental engineer specializing in water resource management with a focus on urban drainage design, flood modeling, and nature-based solutions. He is fellow of the Netherlands Young Expert Program and sits on the South Africa Young Water Professionals National Committee. Craig is also currently serving as the regional manager of the Wetskills Foundation. I believe, Craig, I will leave the floor to you.
Thank you, Davide. Can you hear me fine? All right.
Perfect.
Yeah, as you've said, my name is Craig, and today I want to discuss some work that we did, or I did over the last 3 years, which formed part of my PhD and of my research work. So the title is as written: When Engineers and Scientists in the Social Science Skills to Get Their Jobs Done. Can you have the next slide, please? The core of the work is going to come from this project that we did at the University of Cape Town at the Future Research Institute, where we looked at retrofitting detention ponds for much aquifer recharge. And I'm going to focus specifically on this case study of a pond in Mitchell's Plain in Cape Town. Mitchell's Plain is a low-income neighborhood in the city of Cape Town. And we had one pond that we wanted to retrofit from being just a basic detention pond, which detains stormwater and becomes more of an infiltration pond. Have a next slide, please. So one of the key elements that we realized working in South Africa in the context of this is a low-income neighborhood. South Africa has a high unemployment rate and also very high inequality. We have, I think, up to date the highest Gini index of 0.67, so it's a very unequal country. And because of that, within our retrofit, which was essentially building a berm made of low-cost material, which is sandbags, we decided that we had to work with the local community to get their buy-in within this project. And to do that, we had, next slide, please. We had a lot of outreach programs where we explained what we were doing, how we're going to do it, And the community very much wanted people from their area, and not just like the general area of Mitchell's Plain, but the area next to the pond to be the one that work in the pond. And this exercise took a number of months to even get approved by the residents and to get in to start working in there. And then next slide, please. And for me, doing all this, it really is something that while we had spoken about it in my engineering curriculum, it wasn't something that was as obvious, but I think maybe there was a bit of an advantage in my end, in the fact that I'd worked in humanitarian spaces before. But for the people that I worked with, my fellow engineers, others were doing masters at the time, it was also a unique experience. This is what the retrofit looked like. This was all done using low-cost materials because, again, because of the socio-economic context, if you use metal elements in this area, it gets stolen and disappears. So we use low-cost material, we use rock check dams, we use sandbags, and we use anything that we found around the site which could carry out their purposes. Next slide. And like I said, we spoke about doing community engagement. So I also was curious to find out whether what the activities we're doing would be considered community engagement or just outreach, because there is a spectrum of engagement where it starts from community outreach to community engagement. So I assessed our work as we did it over the last 3.5 years, and to try and see whether the work that we claimed we were doing was whether it was outreach or engagement, and at what point did we move from outreach to engagement. Next slide. And I found that because we had intentionally chosen to do this, and because we had a transdisciplinary team that involved social scientists, we were able to move from more outreach leaning engagements from October 2021 to February 2023, which is a space of about 2 years, 2.5 years. We moved from being heavily outreach leaning to engagement leaning, and the results were that we could see that the community was relating more with us and was helping us with the activities, and also including cleaning up the pond, etc. And next slide, please. So now, as a civil engineer training, some of the elements or aspects of things that were happening there were not really things that I was aware of. So I then leaned towards social sciences, and with the help of some ethnographers, decided to analyze this work using an analytical framework based on Trisos et al., which is the decoloniality and anti-oppressive practices for more ethical ecology. In this framework, I realized we wanted to see if we realized that we need to decolonize the technical mind, that we need to know and attend to local histories, decolonize access, and decolonize expertise, and also practicing ethical ecology in inclusive teams. Next slide. And in this, we found that in decolonize the technical mind is that most of the time, the technical field has been put across as something that you design something, you go to a place and you construct it, and you just tell the residents what you're doing, and more or less they'll accept it. And of course, things are changing now. We're realizing how important it is, but it's still not there. So these are some of the excerpts from the people who worked within the team, the transdisciplinary team. And then one of the engineers has got 20 years experience. He even says that the easiest part is the technical part. Yet engineers are expected to work outside of their field where it is mainly social work. And then they're criticized for not being knowledgeable in these fields. So how do we then change this this way of working, or this practice that exists to actually practice what is supposed to be done in these socially related fields? And we had the same inputs from the urban sustainability researcher and from the water management experts. And then also within the knowing and attending to our histories is that as an engineer, you're supposed to deliberately go and look out at what is happening to people and what's the history like there and how it relates to your job. And people know their own place, they're experts in their own field. So we shouldn't come there with this era of, oh, I know everything that's happening and I can just suggest something. Next slide. Yeah, so this is a very quick summary of the work that we did and some of the findings that we had. And maybe we can discuss more in the question and answer segment. This work formed part of the pathway to Water Resilient South African cities, conducted by the University of Copenhagen and the University of Cape Town, and was funded by the Danish Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Craig, and for starting this webinar, really. And immediately there are, I guess, a lot of questions that come to our mind. And just to be a little bit more precise, you can put them in the chat, but in the chat you can also find the link to a Google document where you can write them. And again, in terms of being a little bit more precise, this webinar is effectively organized by WFEO, the Working Group on Climate Change, the International Coalition for Sustainable Infrastructure, ICSI, and the WFEO Committee on Young Engineers and Future Leaders, a working group on climate action. Incredibly active, incredibly important. As anticipated, I will introduce now the next speaker before going into the Q&A. And the next speaker is Anabel Matalanga. Anabel is a dedicated graduate civil engineer, holding a master in civil engineering from the University of Cape Town. In addition, she contributes to the Young Engineers Working Group for Climate Action, SDG 13, at the World Federation of Engineering Organizations. Anabel is also a social impact advocate, coordinating Engineers Without Borders activities within Kenya. Anabel, over to you.
Thank you, Davide. Thanks for the introduction. Mine is to introduce or reintroduce Engineering Change Campaign, which was initiated and is a collaborative effort between ICSI, that's the International Coalition of Sustainable Infrastructure, and WFEO's, in full, that's World Federation of Engineering Organizations, Young Engineers Working Group on Climate Action. So this was an initiative and a campaign that was launched in the COP28. And you might ask, what is it all about? So it's a global initiative to empower young engineers to take action on the implementation of sustainable development, not only in their workplaces, but also in their communities and within their networks. So it aims to build capacity, fill in the gaps, and equip young engineers in the industry of and in the realm of sustainable development. And these gaps are also filled through broadened perspectives, so through global interaction and engaging with the content that we'll share or will expose you to during the campaign. We'll be able to equip young engineers on how to be effective when it comes to sustainable development, climate action, and what's generally needed in our evolving industry. So some of you may have engaged with this campaign already through our survey, which we undertook at the end of last year and before launching it in COP28. And we managed to touch on 17 locations in Europe, Africa, North America, South America, Asia, and Oceania. It was mostly participated in through the young engineers. And I want to highlight a few things that came out of the report. So young engineers perceived significant challenges in implementing sustainable practices, and they emphasize inadequate resources and time allocation. However, with this, we also saw that managers expressed more optimism around the available support and the resources. The second thing was that engineers recognized the diverse benefits of additional training, and they wanted tailored upskilling initiatives, which were based on the experience levels and regional contexts. So through your feedback, through engaging with this campaign, we hope to have context-based information come out that's applicable across the board, and that will only be through your engagement. The third thing is that through upskilling, young engineers found that they had more job satisfaction, a better sense of purpose, and professional growth. And the good thing and the wonderful and encouraging thing to see on our end was that managers and young engineers advocated for stronger initiatives to rapidly upskill the workforce in sustainable development. Yes, so we have a targeted program over the next 12 months, which seeks to provide guidance and create a platform of connection and knowledge sharing within the sustainable development community. At the moment, we're organizing for a to put together existing training pathways for our members and those active in the campaign to participate in and to engage with. We're also going to be having a call for case studies from the young people implementing sustainable development principles. I think during the World Engineering Day, we saw a lot of competition, a lot of content go out. So we're looking forward to seeing those coming through our platform. To join us, you can click on the link, which I'll also share in the chat box, and scroll down the page and you'll see the Get Involved box where you can put in your opinions, especially if you read the report. Kindly read the report, give your feedback, give your insights, give your criticisms, not really on the content of the report, but how you think things can be done differently. If you have different insights on the results, it would really be great to see these so that when we're curating this campaign, we have all your opinions on board from all the different regions and more. So yes, thank you. Thank you for your time. And I really look forward to seeing more engagement with this campaign so that it really brings about the change that we need to be seeing in engineering and climate action and sustainable development as young engineers. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anabel, for sharing, the finding of this study. And again, I'm sure there are going to be a lot of thoughts about the role of young engineers, and especially being a little bit less young, the role that we can have as middle management or senior leaders in really unleashing all the power of the young engineers. So we have 10 minutes for Q&A with Anabel and Craig. Craig, please come back on the screen so I can see you. Great. Now let me see where the technology works, and I will go straight to the Google document where there is immediately a question for Craig. Do you think all engineering minds can learn to think and work differently?
Sorry, can you repeat again?
Yeah. So the question is, do you think all engineering minds can learn to think and work differently? How do you convince those who are reluctant to change their views? Immediately, a very provocative question.
Okay, so I think the first one, so as part of the Young Expert program, we had a training where they made us do the MBTI exercise. And I know there's a lot of controversy towards whether that is an accurate thing or not. But when we did the exercise, all the people were INTJ or S in the box. They asked us our professions, and we're all engineers. So I know it's a small sample, but I think most people end up in engineering thinking a certain way, whether it's by training or whether it's by nature. I don't know, but I do think we don't think the exact same way, but there is a type of thinking that you end up with either from the field itself or maybe because of the science, the STEM-centered education that you've had all this time. And because of that specific ones, you find that in general, we tend to shy away from interaction that is beyond, that is out of what we call the traditional STEM fields. Anything that requires you to start talking about philosophy, talking about non-tangible things or subjective topics, we tend to shy away from that because and then just like, oh, I can't prove that. So maybe, yeah, we are not the same, but we're alike. And then the second part of the question was, sorry?
Well, the second part was pretty much about how to persuade to take on board the ones that are willingly or unwillingly reluctant to change.
Well, I think the first part is to try and change how we are taught. So the pedagogy of engineering has to move from being a place where you go to class and you're only taught math, science, and physics and a sprinkle of humanities, because we do add 1 or 2 humanities courses and say, well, we've given you something, but that's not enough. And if we don't add in our education, society will add it on for us. And you say that the more what is happening in the world is that people are being more in touch with nature, people are being more involved, people are questioning things a bit more, and we're going to get caught out at some point. So it has to start from the pedagogy. But if we missed there, like for us, we've who've left university, we can give it as CPT courses. We can invite anthropologists, social engineers within our companies to give us courses, to give us examples, case studies as CPT points, which we all need at some point. But yeah.
Yep. Great answer. And you know, I think it's also a matter of generational differences. I think it's much more accepted in these days, the aspects of system thinking. And we understand and we appreciate that reality is much more complex than I would say it was, because it's been always complex. But now we have an appreciation, we have tools, and we have sensitivity to approach solutions in a much more holistic and system thinking way. Maybe we move, thank you for that. Maybe we move to Anabel, because there are a couple of questions for Anabel as well. And the first one is about the benefits for young engineers to join the campaign, the engineering change campaign. What are the benefits?
Some of the benefits that, in our view, for joining the campaign is gaining exposure to different ways of doing things, especially because as young engineers, sometimes we don't know how to navigate our workplace, how to get engaged with our community. So seeing the different case studies, being connected with people who have, you know, done similar things or even other things that could be applicable to our projects, I think that's a very big benefit. Also, being able to build your capacity and having one place where you can inquire about or engage with content that's relevant to sustainable development within that can help you build capacity within the workforce, grow yourself, and improve your job satisfaction. I think that's at least two of the benefits that come to mind, amongst many others once we get going. Of course, with more engagement, we'll be able to have a lot more activities and a lot more benefits. So yes.
Sure, and thanks for that. And it sounds like you're already providing some elements for the following question, which is, why do you see the need for this campaign?
Yes, in our engagements, I mean, not just on the global space, but even locally, there's been several calls to action. And these have been identified for individuals and organizations. That's why even the survey touched on managers and young engineers, not just young engineers, but all around. So to accelerate engineering change, the world we are in is evolving extremely fast. So yeah, that's why we designed this campaign, and we continue to design this campaign to help people understand how to even champion the business case for sustainable development practices, drive advocacy and training. Yeah.
And thanks for that. Do you want to say a few words about what the managers, what the leaders could do really in order to, you know, promote the activities that you are thinking of?
I think being open to change is one thing. I think Craig mentioned it earlier. Being open to change, encouraging young engineers to speak up, share their ideas. No ideas are right or wrong, you know. They just need experience to be tailored for problem solving and for solutions that we need. Being open to change within themselves and the work they're doing, you know. And again, this goes back to allowing young engineers to bring in the ideas, even in anything, whether you're young, old, in anything. When you have a new person on your team, they'll always bring a freshness. So I would say that's the one thing I would encourage managers to do before anything else. Also provide opportunities for upskilling. That's not just in terms of resources, but in terms of time, you know, allowing the young engineers to step out and get the relevant training towards sustainable development. Yeah. I'm sure there's so many others, and I'd love to see them through our chat box.
I completely agree, but this is a great one. Use your 2 ears more than your mouth. And so think and give the opportunity to learn, because this is learning for everybody. I guess before moving, thank you, Anabel. Before moving to the next section, I think there's a last one for Craig about how do you capture and disseminate the learning from your project?
How do we capture and disseminate the learning from our project?
Yeah.
So we've done it in a number of ways. We did a short almost like a TEDx video of this. We've written papers. There's actually a paper with the same title as my presentation, managing when engineers and scientists need their social science skills. But I know most people don't read scientific papers, so we are trying. We are trying to do some popular science articles. Well, I would have done that if I did for a postdoc. So now I'm doing it like slowly because I left that part of the research, and now I'm more in industry. And we don't have a lot of time to do other things, as Anabel is saying. So yeah, we are doing. I'm going to try and do it in a popular science article, or maybe one as a LinkedIn article. But there is a scientific paper, and there's a video on YouTube that more or less describes what we did and how I did it.
I like your approach. It's effectively taking all the different aspects of dissemination, the scientific one, the more rigorous one, and I'm sure that people read. Not maybe everybody papers, but clearly you can really have a much bigger reach with social media and the tech talks.
Yeah.
So well done on both of you, and thank you so much for opening up this webinar. I think at this stage we are going to move to the next speaker, who is Mark Crouch. Mark is the decarbonization discipline lead at Mott MacDonald. He is an experienced carbon management consultant. He worked in energy, environment, and water sectors. He has been working in these sectors since 2003, with a broad range of public and private sector clients in the UK and internationally. Mark today is representing the ICE on ICSI, Funding and Financing Action Track. He is the co-lead, and he's going to present on his work, the ICSI Funding and Financing Action Track. Mark, over to you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for the intro, Davide, and fantastic to follow on from Craig and Anabel as well. So I think that really set us up really well for the themes that I'm going to talk about. So as you said in the intro, Davide, I'm here in my role as co-lead of the ICSI Funding and Financing Sustainable and Resilient Infrastructure Action Track. But I also, I guess I came into this because of my role at Mott MacDonald leading on decarbonisation, where as part of a big engineering organisation and working on climate change and decarbonisation issues, and constantly that interface between how projects are funded and financed, and then how they're delivered by engineers, and either in a due diligence type role, but also speaking to that funding and financing community and hearing a lot this constant message around there's no shortage of money to fund this infrastructure, but there's a lot of barriers, and there's more that we could get from the engineering community to support us with delivering these projects, and equally there's more that the engineering community need from the finance community to understand how to make projects deliverable. So it was really this whole work stream was coming from that place, and I very much came into that from a decarbonisation perspective, but it's been broadened out in a true kind of integrated approach to climate change and sustainability, to very much cover resilience and adaptation and wider sustainability as well. So if we can just move on to the next slide, please, Billy. Where this kind of came from is around COP27, the Institution of Civil Engineers launched a report focused on financing low carbon infrastructure, and that was how I became involved in this. I was a kind of a key part of authoring that report with representatives from around industry. But then in parallel, ICSI and the Global Covenant of Mayors had also been producing a nice piece of work around upscaling infrastructure resilience through innovative financial approaches, governance and practice. And when we got together with colleagues from ICSI and the Global Covenant of Mayors, and the Institution of Civil Engineers and looked at the recommendations that these reports were kind of putting forward, there was a lot of common themes. So so we came together and launched the action track. And over the last year or so, we've been building a community to follow through on some of these recommendations, and also develop some advocacy positions that that we're putting forward through international forums, through international events, through our networks. And there are really some key messages that I think we can use to drive engineering-led impact and influence policy outcomes at these global events and fora. So if we can move on to the next slide, Billy. These are quite kind of simple, really. There's 3 advocacy positions that have a lot of substance beneath them, but this first one is around infrastructure investment decisions adopting a systemic approach that embeds both low carbon strategies and measures while enhancing the resilience of infrastructure systems. And that's for the benefit of communities and natural ecosystems. So very much kind of supportive of sustainable development goals. And some of the detail beyond that is really to just highlight that the engineering community strongly advocates for these systemic interventions, and you know we're looking for holistic outcome-led integrated interventions that require inclusive engagement. So that's going beyond our project delivery team, but reaching out to broad range of stakeholders across the whole infrastructure value chain, very much including the local communities, working with them and being led from local communities as well is really important. And that really we're advocating for engineers to have the technical know-how. You know, we understand that engineers are great at providing evidence-based practical solutions that meet the demands of policymakers, but it's about increasing investor confidence, and this is where that piece around bringing the 2 communities together is so important, around understanding what investors need when they're looking at big portfolios of investments, whether that's coming from international finance and multilateral development banks, or finance through a variety of local or international means. What do the investors need to actually make projects happen, and what can the engineers do at the very early stages of projects to make sure that their technical know-how is communicated to those stakeholders to make these projects happen. And then I guess we're all aware in the climate change space that the resilience and adaptation really needs to get boosted up the agenda, and the potential trade-off between investing in resilience and adaptation and other policy drivers, such as achieving net zero targets, is really accounted for and addressed. And then supporting tailored policies and regulatory frameworks with strength of governance and innovative financing approaches. So it's about kind of enabling greater uptake of resilience and adaptation in infrastructure development, delivery and maintenance. So moving on to the second advocacy position. So that point around closing the adaptation finance gap, it requires really urgent focus. When we look at the climate science, it's really clear that there's a big gap between what's currently being delivered and what's required in all parts of the world. And to close that adaptation finance gap, we really need to find ways of making adaptation and resilience projects much more investable. And that's through creating the right enabling environments and really having a far better articulation of the value delivered by investments. So what the UN Environment Programme Adaptation Gap Report says on this is that the adaptation finance needs are around 10 to 18 times as great as the current finance flows. And the estimates of what's required to meet this gap do keep increasing. So we really need an immediate increased focus on resilience and adaptation finance, particularly in developing countries. And so as part of communicating and articulating this benefit, we need quantification of the financial value, but also the wider benefits of resilience investments. They've really got to improve, and investment is required to further develop the methodologies and tools, and make far better holistic assessments, and understanding where the benefits flows, because that's obviously part of the challenge with adaptation and resilience is actually articulating where all this international finance, which we keep hearing is available, what do we need to do to demonstrate where those benefits accrued and how they help the local communities, and also looking at it from a pure business perspective of where the savings come in the long run and the resilience. So there's a lot of work to be done in this area that engineers really have a big role in supporting, alongside this funding and finance community. And then the final, the third advocacy position is around communication of risks and returns, so capacity building and knowledge transfer. These are really key enablers of implementation at scale. So clearly communicating the risks, benefits, and costs of inaction that can be realized through infrastructure. This is really key to acceptance and uptake amongst those communities, amongst decision makers and the wider public. There are some real local knowledge gaps that need to be addressed amongst policymakers and practitioners. These need to be really identified and addressed. And there are often insufficient resources for developing local capacity. What's preventing local stakeholders from engaging in new infrastructure projects or achieving a level of competency to sustain resilient projects once they've been delivered? How, when we've invested capital in projects, do we have the local support to make sure that they're delivered and maintained over time? So once financing is in place, the next major bottleneck is really about that capacity and capability of the local and global engineering community to implement just, sustainable, resilient, and nature positive infrastructure, and particularly in developing countries where it's most needed. So what we're looking for is really the development, curation, dissemination of a database of solutions, resources, and best practice, as an effective way to transfer knowledge across sectors and minimize duplication and accelerate uptake. So ICSI is working with international engineering institutions, with communities, with outreach to try and implement some of this at scale. But clearly, through ICSI, we're quite a small number of people, and what we're looking for is to push out these positions as widely as we can, to engage others, to embed some of these messages in the work that a lot of great institutions are already doing, to really, upscale this agenda. And the next steps that this action track is working on are convening a series of engineering-led virtual roundtable discussions, where we're bringing in policymakers, investors, and insurers to address these challenges around scaling up adaptation and climate finance, while decarbonising the sector, really guided by these advocacy statements. So these are going to be cross-sectoral, cross-discipline dialogues, creating a space for engineers to actively listen and effectively communicate expertise around these solutions. So I'd like to kind of leave with really that key message around reaching out to people that want to be involved in this really important area at the nexus of finance and engineering and sustainability and climate change, to really get in touch if you'd like to be involved in this action track and those roundtables. So I'll hand back to you, Davide.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you for sharing the ABC of sustainable infrastructure, sustainable and resilient infrastructure. I think three very important cornerstones of what is really needed to achieve that goal. And we have the honor of the last speaker to be Professor Jianping, who is going to present about an important project that is leading within WFEO. Jianping, who is a professor in civil engineering at Tsinghua University, China, as well as is the director of the Tsinghua University, University of Cambridge in the UK, and the MIT in the United States Future Transport Research, and the Chen Gong scholar, professor of Ministry of Education of China. His main research interests include traffic modeling and simulation and sustainable transport system. Today, he's going to present a project that within the working group on climate change and engineering he started and is still leading about mitigation of climate change. Professor Hu, I leave it to you to tell us more.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, David. And good evening, everyone. Here's Jianping Wu. I'm presenting the WFEO Climate Change Mitigation Best Practice Project. Next slide, please. Okay, this project with the aim is to make the best contribution to global climate change mitigation. How do we do that? We are going to, because WFEO has over 100 member countries and societies. So we are going to collect the best practice projects for climate change mitigation from all the WFEO member states. And then we select and put this data in a database and to share with all the WFEO member states, then to support their action for mitigate the climate change. Next slide, please. So this project, currently we focus on civil engineering and the construction sector. The reason is this accounts for 1/3 of the global final energy use and almost 40% energy-related CO2 emissions globally. So with that, so we think if we can do anything in this area, in civil engineering and construction, then that will be a great contribution for the global climate change mitigation. Next slide, please. The task in this project include 5 sites. One is to build a database and to hold the data from all the WFEO member states. And then based on the data, the project team will publish technical reports and also to release practice guide to all the WFEO member states. And also we will hold international conference and workshops. And also when there is need, we will provide training courses. Next slide. To collect the data we need, we designed a questionnaire which include the following 7 aspects. First of all is about the design of the building or engineering project. And 2 is building materials. 3 is the construction engineering. 4 is the operation of the building. And 5 is a reconstruction of those older buildings And number 6 is how to deal with the building waste. And 7 is some macro indicators from each state. So we send it around to all these 7 questions in the questionnaire to all WFEO member states. Next slide. Okay, to do that, to make the best results, we separate this in 2 steps. In phase 1, we try to select a small group of WFEO member states and share this, send this questionnaire to them and get the feedback from them. And based on that, then we can modify our questionnaire and then send it to more wider the member states of the WFEO. So currently we have already sent out 7, 8 this kind of questionnaires, and we get 3, 4 of these back from our national these WFEO member states. Next slide, please. For example, here, the project team, based on the data we collected from the different country, here we made a comparison on the energy saving on building materials from different countries, for example, from China, Peru, and Malaysia. For example, on the energy saving building materials, China have tried to developing those energy saving building materials such as low radiation coated glass, solar power generation materials, and so on. Peru use those concrete partly taken from the secondary raw materials from new type of cement, and Malaysia use the skylight windows to allow significant amount of daylights into the office space, for example. So from here we can see all the different countries, they will have their good practice for to mitigate climate change. So all these successful examples can be shared by other countries. Next slide, please. So in here, we can see also we compared how the method to reduce the level of energy consumption for the engineering. So China, Peru, Malaysia, we compared and we found out a lot of these practice and examples can be learned, can be used by other countries. So different countries can learn this kind of good practice from other countries. So by this way, we can significantly improve the practice. So we can make the good project for each country to make the best practice to reduce the carbon emission and to mitigate the climate change. So we think this is a very good practice project. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Okay. So far, according to the questionnaire we collected, we received from these WFEO, the member states, we also find out something we can modify, and then we are going to use more tableized and make the people easier to fill in the data and more standardized. And also each good example project, we want them provide like 200 text words to describe the project and include engineering the work, a photo of that as well. So make it easy to catch and for easy to read and to understand. So that's the further work we are going to we are doing, and next step we will be send out more this kind of questionnaire to all these WFEO member states, and waiting to come back more these good and practice examples. Next slide. Okay, the project was initiated by WFCE and supported by WFEO and its member countries, and currently hosted in Tsinghua University, China here. The WFEO, this project team welcome broad recognition and support from WFEO member states, international research institutions, societies, and funding institutions to make great success of this ambitious project. Thank you. Thank you, Davide.
Thank you so much, Professor Fu. And as you said, this is a global, international project on best practice. So incredibly important because it will contribute to share knowledge and avoiding reinventing the wheels and hopefully mitigating the climate change. So we have a couple of questions for the last speakers before wrapping up with Savina. And one for Mark is, what are the main barriers that prevent engineers from working with financiers and policymakers?
Well, I think there's several. I think the most easily addressable one is the kind of the mindset, and I think we're beginning to see some real progress in this direction with what some of the engineering institutions are doing. Certainly, there's been a huge amount of change in terms of getting climate change capabilities into professional development schemes. And I think what we need is more of that, but really focused on the funding and finance elements, so that engineers can look beyond their specific area of a project to think about the bigger issues about how that project's funded, what do they need to make it happen. So I think there's a real mindset and kind of education piece, and I think I'd encourage anyone on any project they're working on to really think upstream beyond just the task that they're been asked to do, to think about the bigger picture and why their project is being delivered, what's the main outcome it's trying to deliver, but then where is the money and the finance coming from to deliver that. So I think it's the most important thing for me, I think, is mindset and education.
Correct. And thanks for that. The following question I will ask you, but the final bit of that question is actually very relevant to you as well, Mark, about trade-offs not well understood between mitigation and adaptation or resilience. But the question is pretty much for Professor Fu, whether whether you are planning to look at the adaptation alongside mitigation best practice, maybe in the future.
Sorry, catch it. What's the first part of the question?
The very first part of the question is, your project is about best practice on mitigation aspects of climate change, whether you are going to look at the adaptation best practice as well in the future.
Okay. As a WFEO, you know, as we in the beginning, we talked about because in the civil engineering sector, it contributes about 1/3 to 40% of global energy cost, and we think we start from here. If we can make anything change, for example, even we can increase 10%, this kind of reduction of this CO2 emission, then there would be a great contribution to this world. So we will start from here. But well, in the future, if when all this succeeded, we may extend our area. But yeah, currently we will focus on civil engineering and the construction area.
Thank you for the answer. And at this stage, I would really like to thank all 4 presenters, because I really want to hear from Savina the very final points. So let me just give me an opportunity to thank Anabel, Craig, Jianping, and Mark for your excellent presentation, and all of you for following us. And I will just pass it to Savina Carluccio, Executive Director of ICSI, for her final thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you, Davide, and thank you to all presenters. I'm really enjoying this discussion, and I see a very strong thread emerging, I think, from this webinar, which is engineers really needing to come out of their shell, needing to do things differently, needing to push their boundaries. And this is really encouraging, and I'm really excited that this is the direction that the profession is really taking to adapt and evolve. Because the scale of the challenge and the complexity of the challenge is just such as that the old ways will not cut it. We can't really continue to do as we've known so far and what we've always done. It's just will not work. And so what we need urgently is that kind of holistic thinking, coming out and really advocating strongly for what should be changing, should be communicating more effectively. I mean, let's just face it, this is something that we really need to be working at. But in just looking back at our speakers today, you know, like the first couple of speakers, they could probably be teaching communications and thinking and doing things differently. And maybe it is a generational thing, but I hope not, because I'm learning myself, and I'll keep on learning how to communicate, how to advocate. And so I think you can learn at all ages. But there is obviously a generational thing where Craig tells us that we need to be thinking about including social sciences in engineering education. Fantastic point, you know, absolutely. Anabel talking to us about being more proactive and in advocating upwards towards policymakers to influence policy, but also advocating in the workplace. You know, young engineers to have their space to upskill, to actually work on projects they really care about. And then, Mark, I guess this is where also engineers come out of their shells and need to advocate and engage with those policymakers and investors. And sometimes in its education mindset, maybe it's also language, going back to communicating with other groups that are not our usual peers. And because we do have a role, and we do have like a lot to offer, but we just need to be also showing others and make them understand what is the value what is the value of what we can offer. So I'll just stop here, and I'll just want to thank again all the speakers, and thank you, Davide, for this flawless chairing today. And with this, I'll draw this webinar to a close. Thank you and goodbye.